name is Meredith Niles. I'm with the Center for Food Safety here in Washington, D.C. And my question is more about the social impacts of nano in food. This isn't something that I saw here, and I'm thinking mostly about the last presentation, specifically looking at biotech and the examples that we've learned from biotech. We've seen a various amount of regulations in developing countries for biotech, including outright bans and moratoriums. And I'm wondering what your position or what you think might be some of the social implications of nano in food, specifically in developing countries, and potential rejection of these types of technologies.
Okay.
I'm J.D. Hansen with the International Center for Technology Assessment, one of the NGOs that Dr. Rocco identified as being in this field. We've actually coordinated a group of non-governmental organizations on every continent to develop principles for oversight of nanotechnology, which I left some copies out there. My question, though, is our groups are very concerned about the environmental health and safety issues and research on that. There seems to be a disconnect between what is being said in Congress by the administration and what's being said here today. At the House bill reauthorizing nanotechnology had in it originally that 10% would be set aside for environmental health and safety. We think that's too little. But the administration came in and said, no, we can't live with that. And I'm told by the Republican representatives in the Senate, the administration told the Senate Republican staff that they wouldn't buy 10%. You guys are the administration. So, you illustrated some wonderful things in environmental health and safety. Why won't you support a floor that the NGO community thinks is too small to begin with? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to add a question somewhat related to that, and maybe Dr. Chen can address that later on. What's in the new Farm Bill about, it has a much expanded agriculture research budget, increased competitive grant schemes. How will that relate to nano-agro technology?
You talked about a couple of major corporate entities who develop nanotechnology for, I guess, agriculture as well. Are these the same mega corporations that develop biotech? In other words, those 5, 6 who have the money to do that? And if yes, where do you see a potential profit stream, particularly coming from the developing world that have no money?
Hi, I'm Caleb O'Cray with the Foreign Agricultural Service. And talking with some of my colleagues there at USDA, it occurred to us that as we move the discussion from research more into regulatory discussions, that it might be important to divide agricultural nanotechnology into various phases. And you mentioned that of moving from seeds to actual production to processing and packaging and thereafter. Do you think that it's best that we kind of divide agricultural nanotechnology into these different distinct phases in order to have a useful regulatory discussion? Because it seems like addressing it at large right now isn't going to move anywhere.
Ian Illuminato with Friends of the Earth here in Washington, D.C. And my question is in reference to the commercialization of nano and the current products that are on the market as we speak. With the products on the market, why are those products on the market if we have so very little health and safety studies? And why is there no labeling as well for to give consumers the freedom to decide whether or not they want to partake in this experiment?
My name is Sarah Goodman, and I'm a reporter with Greenwire. I just wanted to know if any of the applications that were discussed, especially for food, if any of that is already in the market and being used, or if it's all in research right now.
Yes, that would be helpful if we get a bit more information on that.
I answer several questions, and I will leave my colleagues to respond to the most difficult ones. First of all, I will start maybe with the question why the public the role of the public in this debate. I think, first of all, is more and more recognized as science and new technologies affect society at large and will affect more and more in the future. And certainly, any new development brings ethical issues, problems of distribution, safety. However, this is not something that is new itself. All the developments in the past happened on the same path, and in fact, we have to embrace exploratory work in research, trying to be as safe as possible and trying to communicate and trying to inform the public to have interactions. At the same time, will be probably unethical not to provide food to people, let's say in Africa, because we don't like to do research on food on the nanoscale. And here I come to the second point that was questioned here. Nano itself is not dangerous. I can just to clarify, nano is 1 nanometer is the size of a molecule, a small molecule. Nanoscale is a place where you have first level of assembling of molecules, like a nanobiomotor, like a nanoparticle, that creates the properties that you see at macro scale. 100%, anything around us has a nanostructure. Nanoparticle exists all around us. The way that cells takes oxygen and food is also through nanoparticle penetrating the cells each moment. That means itself, nano is not a dangerous, it's not something synthetic, artificial. Like in micro, you can do microparticle, you can do nanoparticle, and some could be toxic, for instance. That means the issue is to identify which are toxic and not to spend time to tell all around us is dangerous. This is more is a problem of definition. And so that means I like to go to the to respond to a question that many products have already nanostructures. Now, if we do not control the process, it's not nanotechnology. Nanotechnology is a moment when you have a process under control. You like to do this, and you make a special effort to change the properties for a given goal. Now, there are many products now that have nanostructure inside, and this is part. I would like to mention that most of the nanoparticles around us certainly are natural ones. And now, going to the second point is that nanoparticles that are created on purpose have usually new properties. Are small, that means can penetrate easy as a tissue, may be concentrated in one place where is a point of fabrication. That means inherently you have some conditions for higher risk of exposure or toxicity. And so one has to address from the beginning this. However, will be non-productive to tell that anything that is nano, by definition, that means the same thing people who have told maybe 20 years ago about micro. Anything that is micro is dangerous. It's not the case. That means one has to identify which structure, which materials could have the risk and address the problems for that aspect. Now, here comes a problem of how much research we need for this. Research, first of all, can be done only progressively as the knowledge develops. What means this? For instance, if we don't have any devices to measure nanoscale, how we don't have now to monitor an environment, or we do not have the knowledge to create any nanosystems under control now, we do only simple structure like nanoparticle, nanotubes, and some other developments, but relatively simple, will be difficult to tell a priori what will happen. It's a kind of, we do not know exactly what are the future products. That means, first point that I like to make, when you develop research and safety, you have to develop progressively and to be incorporated in the research effort. That means it's not that you do research and use it after safety. Now, in this framework, at NSF, when we started Nano in 2000, in fact, in the program, we have 6 components for research in the program announcement. Of this, one was an environmental aspects and one was societal implication. And as a result, if you look to NSF budget since 2000, we have about 15 to 16% addressed to societal implication. What means is about 7 to 8% of projects that have relevance to environment, like nanoparticle in soils, or aerosol formation in or about 7% are for educational purposes and about 2% for societal implication, like ethical, legal aspects. Now, will be difficult if, for instance, NSF will have received a restriction of 3% like NIH receives for different other projects, would have limited the research. Now, at the same time, if you go another place where it just starts to do the research, if you put 10%, you don't have good people to do because they don't know what to do, and you establish a line of research that is not state of the art and will become reference for others. And so will be not the best. That means you have to build as part of the total research to have a responsible approach. And and I will call precautionary approach, but not a principle that you don't like to develop the knowledge because you are afraid that you go too fast. In fact, knowledge at this moment in nano helps to understand illnesses that happen because of natural particles that go to the brain, for instance. This mostly happens from natural particles. It's not from artificial, or may help to understand different chronic illnesses or many other things. That means nano, in fact, now is used mostly to understand things that already happened. As I mentioned, anything around us is nano as a first level of organization. And so we do not have to be afraid, we have to be very careful when we develop new products. And but it's not inherently nano a dangerous term. And the last comment to make about how many products are now in the market. The most of the products that are, you do not know. In fact, media covers mainly so-called consumer products that you see, something in sport, something textile, that are minority. If you take production, maybe it's 1% of the production in nano now. The most things that have nanostructure and have a large economic impact are catalysts that are used in oil industry and chemical industry, help molecules to be cut together, large molecule, or to be assembled together. Second, in electronics, where now all the transistors, new transistors have a nano layer. It's very simple, nano components that will become more and more complex. Thirdly, you have in pharmaceuticals, when you create a composition and you make testing, you start now to have in nanobio, you start to have in some special lasers, special materials, special coating. That means these are majority of applications. That means applications in clean pans and let's say nano rackets, how they are called, which many times are not exactly, don't have a new components that claim design a polymeric material at nanoscale. So it's not dangerous by itself, doesn't have a new material. That means industry already has adopted nano a large scale. The risky aspects are mainly with dispersion of nanoparticles at this moment. In the future will be interface with nanobio, active devices, active systems, and will be probably a new kind of problems that have to be addressed a priori, maybe by developing the capacity to address those issues. We do not know exactly what products will be. And I stop here.
Thank you. Briefly, Dr. Chen, we are a bit over time.
Very good. I think there are some really good questions from audience, and I thank you for that. I'm going to be very brief. The first question that I'm just going to say a few words about that and relate to the social impact for nanotechnology, particularly in the developing country. And Michael has addressed a variety of societal issues, and that's part of NNI strategic plan, various different activities being launched there. One example that I want to give you is that the CSRES U.S., this most recent round of competitive grants has solicited proposal to address public perception and acceptance of nanotechnology uses in agriculture and the food system. And we have chosen 3 projects to fund at this time. And so we'll continue looking at expanding our knowledge in that field. You mentioned about biotechnology in your reference. This is a very large topic, and I want to point out that the reference at Michigan State University, led by Dr. Larry Bush, actually is funded by National Science Foundation, and they've conducted a workshop, and they have a book coming out. Is out already, and I recommend to pick up that book and then to examine what the scholars look at. What can nano learn from a bio? And that's exactly, I think, the title of that book. The education, one thing that I wish that you will pick up this message and help to communicate to the public is really the education and then the communication. Michael, as you point out, the nanoparticle or nanotechnology is not a single entity. As we are encountering numerous nanoparticles in our life, many food molecules, materials are the nanostructure, proteins. I showed the example of DNA, 2.5 nanometer. These things exist in the foods we're eating for thousands of years. So you shouldn't see the nanoparticle as equal that to bad things, because the tremendous variation, and so we must build that in mind. And then I can also give you example that the food processing that intend to modify the protein supermolecule structure and for the new functionality. And if you know anything about the cheese making and then the casein misal, and then you know what I'm talking about. And so shouldn't be panic about the technology and being by the nanoparticles. You have to be specific about to talk about what you're talking about. The questions about who are behind the development of this nanotechnology, nanoproducts, and my answer is everyone. The mega companies certainly invest, look at the new functionality and be incorporated in the product, provide better products. And small company, the entrepreneurships, and you can see everywhere. Large country, small country. I mentioned about Thailand. For instance, Thailand has identified one project that's looking at the animal reproduction. That actually still remains to be a challenge even for developed country. And how do we increase animal reproduction rate? And so they have identified that area as using nanotechnology to help towards a solution of that. So everybody is doing that. There's a suggestion about separate the agricultural nanotechnology application in agriculture into various different phases to facilitate regulatory policy and the practice. I think that's a great idea. And I'm not in regulatory branches, so I know little about that. But I think that's a very constructive suggestion. And similar in line that, as I pointed out earlier on, that when you come to talk about nanoparticles, what are you talking exactly? To be specific, what technology you're talking? To be specific, and that's shared a similar principle. And I very much like that idea. There's questions about the products already in the market. Are there products in the The examples that I presented here today are the research stories. They are not in the market yet, but they are products in the market already. I'll give you one example. A Japanese company produce nano-encapsulate micronutrient, for instance, the iron. Philippine government want to improve iron deficiency in a country, and they fail terribly because the scientists didn't know how to incorporate the iron into the rice. And of course, the suggestion to go to the biotechnology, and I'll take a long route. But this microencapsulation, nano-encapsulation, they mask undesirable sensory characteristics, i.e. the rusty color and upsetting the stomach and the poor sensory, the taste, and the masking all this, improve bioavailability tremendously. And that has been a very successful example, and then products have been recognized by a number of professional society, by trade organization, and they receive awards. They have some successful products and other micronutrients that are very difficult to be be put into the food. And that's a very relatively easy approach to fortify certain foods and then the use for the developing countries, solve a short-term problem. Very effective approach. So, and that will be some of these things that needed to worth to paying the attention. Success, for example, was there's a question about the products in market that was so little. The EHS study and the labeling. I'm not in the regulatory branch, and I cannot really give you a satisfactory answer. But I think one of the things is that the perception or confusion about what nanotechnology you're talking about, what nanoparticles you're talking about, that may cause some confusion here, and so that might be part of that issue, and and worth of further looking into that. Questions about the Farm Bill. Farm Bill at this moment is in the early stage of discussion about the implementation. So there's no details to my best of knowledge, so I cannot give you the answer. But I think overall, the increase investment in the competitive research can help enhance research quality, and I think that is a good thing.